The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference. I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today I'm very pleased to have Marie Basham on my show, who's a human trafficking prevention activist and speaker. She's involved in bullying and cyberbullying prevention speaking as well. And she's been awarded many awards for various things. And she'll tell us a little bit about that. But first I want to start by talking a little bit about bullying. You know, in 2014, the Center for Disease Control and the Department of Education released the first federal uniform definition of bullying for research and surveillance. The core elements of the definition include unwanted aggressive behavior, observed or perceived power imbalance, and repetition of behaviors, high likelihood of repetition. There are many different modes and types of bullying, which include indirect bullying, direct bullying, physical, verbal, and damage to property. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about today, and Marie Basham is going to be the one who's going to be able to answer a lot of your questions and provide you with information and education about this very serious subject. So, Dawn, welcome to the Susan Brender Show, and I'm very pleased to have you on. And I'd like you to tell our audience how you got involved in this issue of bullying, because it is something that is really pervasive, and people are very concerned about it.
Well, hi, Susan. Thank you so much again for having me. Thank you for that wonderful intro. So, yes, I actually was bullied as a kid, so it is a cause that is close to my heart, and I became involved with it because, like I said, I remember so well what it's like to be in that age group, middle school years, high school years, when it seems that bullying is the worst. And so I started doing career days at schools, and actually being invited to schools to speak on other topics such as modeling and acting, because at the time I was doing quite a bit of television and modeling in magazines and catalogs. And so I would be invited in to talk to kids and tell them about the acting and performing arts industry. And then it would lead into a conversation about bullying. And it ended up just something that became, I saw a need for it. Kids were responding to it. And over time, word started getting out that I was able to connect with kids in a way that others maybe couldn't, just because of my unique perspective of having survived bullying and some of the lessons that I had learned. And it went from being a classroom discussion or a career day visit to becoming school-wide assemblies. And I was doing them all across the country for many years, starting in roughly 2002. So.
Yeah, when people are being bullied, and I say people, it's really kids for the most part, the reasons may be incomprehensible. I mean, if your son or daughter is a victim, what in heck do you do about it?
Well, the most important thing is don't tell your child just to ignore it. That was something that I think was very common when I was growing up. I heard that most often is, oh, just ignore it, let it roll off your back. Don't take it personally. And bullies don't stop just because you ignore it. And I'm a firm believer that you have to confront, that you really have to show your strength with a bully. What parents can do, there's a couple of things. If you're looking to prevent a bullying situation from occurring at all, I always think it's so important for parents to instill in their kids a sense of identity, a sense of purpose, a sense of confidence, and to project that when they are carrying themselves through life. So, for example, I personally, as a child, was very insecure, very shy, very soft-spoken, and I used to show it in my physical, in my body language, in my demeanor. I did not speak up for myself. I rarely made eye contact. I avoided taking up space. I felt like I didn't have the right to take up space, and so therefore I slouched. And a bully will spot this a mile away, and that becomes the bully's next target. A bully is not going to scan the room and look for the toughest, smartest, strongest person. They're going to look for the person that's easiest to get away with it with. So I always teach parents you have to teach your kids real self-esteem. And I'm not talking about just the sort of sugarcoating and positivity, think positive, and all that stuff. I believe in authentic, really working deeply to develop self-esteem with your kids. So meaning really instilling them a sense of who they are, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of integrity, and so those, and carrying yourself and projecting that physically. And I feel like that does help quite a bit. It's not
Right.
fail-proof. Of course, there's always exceptions, but I feel like that helps a lot. And they even tell you when you travel to a foreign country, don't look lost, don't look like you're vulnerable, because that's what thieves or criminals will look for to prey upon you. So the same applies at school, and really in your adult life or anywhere you go, in the workplace. It's important to carry yourself with a sense of confidence and strength. So that's one way of preventing bullying. But if you find that your children are in a situation of bullying, they're being bullied actively at school, I'm all about making noise. You've got to go to teachers. You've got to go to administrators. You've got to follow up. You've got to show your face, and you've got to keep following up. And if you don't get satisfaction, you've got to go to that person's superior and keep going up the chain. So I've always believed in that. You can't just, like I said, you can't just ignore it and hope that it goes away and tell yourself, oh, kids will be kids. This is part of life. It's not part of life. It should not be part of life anyway. I think that we have the power to create an environment in our schools where kids are safe and respect one another. So.
That's right. What makes someone become a bully? As far as I know, bullies are motivated by deeper reasons, like problems at home, or they've been bullied themselves. From your standpoint, you must have talked to quite a few people who have given you, an idea of what it's about. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what makes someone become a bully?
Yes. So, of course, there's always exceptions, but yes, typically when someone is bullying, it's because there might be something going on in that child's home. Maybe they are experiencing bullying themselves by their own parents, step-parents, a relative, an older sibling, or someone in their life with more power and something that they can't gain control over. And maybe they feel like they have to go to school and act out on somebody weaker than them, which does not make it an excuse, but it's definitely something to be considered when approaching the situation, so that you're not demonizing a child because that child is acting out. That obviously that child is still a child, whether or not that behavior is nice or not, that person still needs help, that child needs help. And so that is a sort of a red flag, and it could be a cry for help, yes. I have seen this as well, though. I've also seen just plain mean children. Or perhaps that child is just acting like their own parents. Maybe their parents are bullies, and they just think that, you know what, I'm entitled. I can treat anyone the way that I want to, and I can just be a mean-spirited little brat. So I've seen that too. But most often, I really do think that it's because they are going through some type of bullying themselves, and it's just really a way of feeling like they have some sense of power over a world that they can't control, where something in their life is out of control that is causing them to feel terribly insecure, and then they go and act it out and find someone weak to take it out on. And then you see that with kids who abuse animals, which is very dangerous, and other situations where kids act out upon something, whether an animal or another sibling or a child, a friend that they bully because they are looking for somebody weaker than themselves. So.
Yeah. Dawn, years and years ago, there used to be schools for deviants, kids who were troubled and kids who really caused trouble. Today, of course, everybody's mainstream. They're all together. If you had an opportunity to talk to people about what they would do with regard to these bullies, and do they belong in a mainstream class? Do they belong in a special class? Do they have enough counselors in the schools, teachers who will identify people who are that way? I'm just curious, what happens when you really have somebody you said it, you used a word which is really true, and that's the word mean. There are kids who are mean, and they create an environment that is really very difficult to do anything in. So I'm just curious, if you had your choice, and I'm speaking specifically for you, what would you do with these kids once you see that they perpetrate many, many different attitudes and crime toward others?
Yes, and if it's rising to the level of really infringing on another kid's right to go to school and feel safe and feel that they're free to learn and, in a constructive environment, then yes, and if it's a pattern and it's repeated, of course, I believe that child should be removed from the school and put into a different situation, maybe homeschooling or, but like you were just saying, are there enough teachers? Are there enough counselors? No. As long as I've been doing this since 2002, and I've heard this all across the country, not just in Florida, there are never enough resources set aside for bullying prevention specifically. Right. And there's never enough counselors, and there's never enough time. I do this for free. I don't even get paid to speak at schools. And you can offer it to a principal or to teachers and say that you'll be willing to come and do bullying workshops and assemblies. And I've had schools just blow it off and just, so whether it's a lack of resources, sometimes it's a lack of really, really caring or making it a priority in schools. Yes, I do think that there should be workshops. Just to answer your question, I think removing a kid is a good idea if it's a pattern. But I also think that we can't just give up completely. I have seen situations where I have put bullies and victims in the same group and worked together and sort of had those kids in a sort of a mediation situation. And I've had the victim express what it felt like to be bullied, and I've had the bully express an apology after hearing and really having it register with that bully what the actual harm that they caused. And it doesn't always work out. Sometimes bullies just don't get it and they don't care. They're just not in touch with their feelings and not able to connect with that sense of empathy, which is a real problem, and that's an issue. But it's yes, it is possible though if you can get that child to connect, and it is possible for a bully to be rehabilitated and to develop a sense of compassion and sensitivity, and then if you also inspire in the bully to be a hero or an ally rather than to be a bully, and that appeals to that person's sense of power as well. It's putting them in a position of power to protect instead of to harm someone else.
Yeah. Let's turn to another subject that you are very much involved in, and that's human trafficking. You are a human trafficking prevention activist and speaker, and how bad is human trafficking? And you talk about Florida, but I'm sure it's all over all over the world, actually. But let's talk about how bad it is right here in Florida.
Yeah, so Florida ranks actually number 3 for the highest number of reported cases in the United States, and that's just behind California and Texas. And so the reason for that is because we're flourishing in agriculture and tourism. So those two things are always going to be, with those two things, you're going to see a rise in human trafficking. So because people want to exploit, free work, from people so that they can prosper on, in the world of agriculture. And then in terms of, Florida being a tourism place that people, they come to play and have fun and think of it as a party town. You're going to see a lot of strip clubs. You're going to see massage parlors that are not on the up and up, and you're going to see prostitution. So, and then you're going to see a demand for commercial sex with whether it be minors or adults. So yes, it is an issue in Florida. It is a huge challenge that we have those two things.
And how's your government handling it? Because, needless to say, human trafficking is really a horrendous situation. And also, it creates a very bad, how should we call this? Should we say that it creates a real bad reputation for the particular state that it's in, and people, when they find out that it exists here, to the extent that it exists, they may not want to come here as a tourist?
Well, they might come. They might lure people here because actually, I can say this: there are human traffickers or pimps who will cater to the demand in Florida. They will travel with people who are under their control, whether they be minors or adults, because they know that the people here there is a demand here in Florida for commercial sex. So I don't necessarily know that does does affect tourism or not. But it's me personally, I'm ashamed to say that we are number 3, and I'm ashamed that Palm Beach County is number 3 as far as the worst cases reported for the state. And so as far as what our government can do, I think there's so much more we can do. We're making some progress, and there have been some funds allocated for better research in terms of the numbers, in terms of knowing the exact number of cases, and that does help secure funding for actually, for prevention and for law enforcement. But it's not enough right now. And the other challenge is that Florida has become the first state in the country to mandate that all schools teach human trafficking prevention in grades K through 12. However, the challenge is that now we don't have enough resources to teach the teachers to teach this to all of these students. And it's a new thing. It's just happened. The law was just passed. And so we're scrambling now, and they need to get the curriculum written, but they also need to have willing teachers. Some teachers don't want to touch this. This is something that's not necessarily comfortable. And it's just like with sex ed, you're going to have parents that are going to be up in arms because, you're talking to my child about something, very, talking about sex with my child, or, any mention of sex is going to be taboo, and you're going to have some complaints. So it's very delicate, and the way that it's handled for each grade level is very sensitive and very specific. And there's going to be some challenges with that. And so there's a lot of, challenges. So
challenges is a good word. There's no question about it, which leads me to the role that pornography plays in human trafficking, because I had a guest, and I am actually doing a series with a gentleman who is telling how sex addiction is so prevalent, and he talks about pornography all the time, and apparently it's absolutely, sounds like a positive word, but it's not. It's flourishing. It's flourishing. People seem to want to do it.
Pornography and human trafficking is inseparable. I don't think that you can address this problem without addressing pornography. And the root of the problem is the Internet and the access to the Internet. And so children are supposed to be learning about sex education at the appropriate age. When they're going to school, they're going to be learning about it in health class and sex ed. And parents just assume that that's where it begins. But it's not. Kids are able to access their phones. They're carrying around their devices or their iPads and their laptops, and they're able to just go, or they're at a friend's home and they're curious, so they look together. And they can access porn 24/7, any age child that's curious. And the problem with that is that pornography is so addictive, especially for a growing brain, a developing brain. And so this is where young boys, particularly, girls and boys, but particularly young boys, are seeing images or videos of women being depicted in violent situations where it appears that a woman is enjoying having violence inflicted upon her. And that is how a young man is first learning of what sex is. And actually young women too. It's very confusing. So you see that this is your first experience or your first images of what sex is, and you see that you see a woman enjoying being beaten up or being raped violently, as is very common in depictions of pornography. And the porn industry would have us believe that women enjoy violence in sex. And it's not accurate, but it's what they would have us believe. So this is the problem, is that you have this whole generation of kids that are becoming addicted to porn. It is extremely addictive. And and so that is leaves a huge impression on a young brain. And so they go and act it out. And I've seen cases where young boys are addicted to porn, but then porn is not enough. They want to go to the next step, which is to actually purchase commercial sex. So you see, as they get older and they have more access to money, they will find a way to purchase commercial sex. And the other danger with pornography is that the more of a demand that there is for pornography, as that grows and flourishes, you see there are minors being depicted in these sex scenes and these images. And so so men are paying for sex on the Internet, but they're not doing so. There's no way to do so responsibly. There's no way to guarantee that the person that you're watching is not a victim of human trafficking. So in many instances, there are human traffickers who are actually forcing their victims to film videos of themselves in certain situations or scenarios, And so, in some cases it's a child, in some cases it's an adult being forced into it. It's not something they want to do; it's something they're forced to do, or something they're coerced into or brainwashed into. So,
yeah. Which leads me to the question. Many times, and this sounds, it's absolutely ludicrous. I've gone to movies, in which there's quite a bit of sex in these movies, virtually, because that's what sells. Sex sells is really the truth. And I see people bringing small children into the movie. Absolutely right. Bringing small children into a movie that has a lot of sex in it. Mm-hmm. And it's so irresponsible. It's so horrible. And yet it seems to be working for these people that, they take their kids to these movies. And in fact, in other movies where there is no parent and there is a teenager sitting there and watching the violence and watching all the pornography, if you will, the sex, you've probably done a lot of research and you probably recognize that there are families that just have no responsibility when it comes to sex. They just take it for granted, and it's part of our society today. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and it's unfortunately it's not just taking your kids to the movie, because movies exist at home now. Your movies go wherever your child goes as long as that child owns a device. So parents are giving their kids devices as early as six years old, and they can go. They think they're playing a video game, and they're being preyed upon by a human trafficker who's posing as a child. This is very, very common, and so you see 80 to 90% of recruitment for human trafficking happening on the internet. And so, yeah, it's not just going to a movie. It's kids can just access it. They can pull up their phone and see all kinds of graphic images and video games and YouTube videos. And anything they want to see is at their fingertips. So that's the thing I try to tell parents. You would not let your kid just go walking around the neighborhood, unattended. So why would you leave them alone with a device? The internet is dangerous. Giving them access to the internet unattended and unmonitored is dangerous. So yeah, it's not just movies.
Yeah. What is it going to take, Dawn, to eradicate human trafficking? You've seen, you've heard, you're a specialist in this field. I look at it, and you're absolutely right. This digital society is creating sometimes, I hate to say it, but monsters. But yes. I'd like to know how we eradicate it. Is there any advice that you could give to our audience?
I tell you what, I've thought so much about this. I really have, eradicating it, and it's not a simple answer, but the simplest answer I can give you, and what I've come to, the more I've thought about this, is that my hope really is that we become more connected I think because now because of the digital age, we've become so disconnected, and we've become so desensitized, and we're so much about everything that's fake. We all want to look perfect. We want to, even pornography is presented as a perfect scenes of sex, and nobody really knows that it takes days and days to film a perfect scene in pornography. The lighting, the makeup, the drugs that women have to take to get through painful scenes, and all the things that people don't really know that go on. And so I feel this sense of, yes, I feel people have become more and more disconnected from their hearts and their souls and their humanity. And so for me, I feel like the solution is for people to become more authentic, to be in pursuit of authenticity, for real human connection, for things that are real, to be more supportive and accepting of imperfection, and to be more committed to really connecting with others in a human way and getting in touch with compassion. And this goes the same for bullying. It's instead of being so heartless, it's becoming connected. So I feel like that is sort of going in the right direction for a solution. But my hope is that we just kind of, maybe that's going to be a reaction that we'll have to this digital age of everything being disconnected. Maybe that we could be the next generation of people that will reject all things fake, and somehow a hunger will develop in all of us collectively that we will crave what is real. because, after all, we are human, and it's not natural for us to always be attached to our computers and our devices. And it's not natural for all these things that are fake and things that we see on TV. And so I would hope that we do find this sort of sense of ourselves and our humanity, our hearts, our souls, and that which is real and that which is authentic. I feel like that's the way we're going to find a solution. Pornography goes, it's having a real relationship with someone instead of, even human trafficking in and of itself is so disconnected and so fake. It's a transaction between two people having sex. And so how fake and how disconnected can you be? And so, again, it just seems to me that, yes, people need to get back to having an actual relationship with one another instead of, I just want it to be convenient. I just want to be entertained. I just want to see what I want to see and not have to have a responsibility to actually get to know someone with all their getting to know someone and accepting them for their good and their bad and not demanding perfection, which is not achievable.
It's interesting because as you talk about all these different phenomena that exist because of the fact that we live in a digital society and there's so much going on that people just ignore in a way, I always, think about how do we stop all this horror? How do we get to the point where we think about the more important things and deal with the more important things. But, if it'll take an hour or two to continue talking about it. So at this very point, I'd like you to have the last word, Dawn.
Sure,
there must be something that is very important for you.
You mean to say in conclusion?
Yes.
Yes. So I think just to go along with what I was talking about earlier, there's a growing demand and a growing appetite for commercial sex, and really troubling is a demand for commercial sex with children younger and younger. The average target age of a human trafficking victim is 11 to 13, but we're seeing trending even younger and younger, and so and I know this is kind of troubling as well, but the average victim of human trafficking will. Let's say a 5-year span, let's say that she is being trafficked, that she's in the life, she will be forced to have 6,000 different times. And so, how do you recover from that? How does a child go on and recover and go into a normal way of life? And so oftentimes you see that these victims will just continue even after they are let's say they escape and they get out of being trafficked. They go back into it because they don't know any other way. So yes, for me, it's about addressing this growing demand and this growing appetite for commercial sex. And I don't like to single out men, but unfortunately, it's a fact that it is almost exclusively men who pay for commercial sex. We don't see women, this high demand for women looking for commercial sex with anybody. It's men. So I'm not trying to demonize men in any way, but I'm saying that it starts with men. We need allies. There are good, upstanding, many good, upstanding men, and who have never paid for commercial sex. But we need to hear from them. We need to hear their voices, and we need them to be our allies in this cause, to call out other men, and so that it becomes socially unacceptable to be disrespectful or have a disrespectful attitude towards women and children, to be attracted to younger and younger women and boys. And this happens to boys as well. It's not just girls. There are men who seek out sex with young boys and transgender youth. They are particularly vulnerable. So it's addressing the demand, and it's men searching their hearts. You see female pimps, yes, you do see female human traffickers, but the problem is that it's the demand. The only way to solve this is by addressing who's actually asking for this. We wouldn't see human trafficking at all if there weren't people asking for it and demanding it. So men need to search their hearts and where is this demand coming from? And yes, it's men calling out other men, and it has to be socially unacceptable. And not just socially unacceptable, but also we have to stop rewarding it socially, because a lot of times men are high-fiving each other and they're thinking it's cool to behave that way and to pay for commercial sex and go to strip clubs and watch porn, and that's considered, you're more manly if you do those things. And we need to change that attitude and call out other men who have that attitude. And we need to also to teach our boys. So
There you go. Well, my guest today has been Dawn Marie Basham, who is a human trafficking prevention activist and speaker, a bullying, cyberbullying prevention speaker, and various other things, which we won't mention because I'll tell you something, Dawn, you have a list of amazing credentials, and I think that you can absolutely make a difference in the world that we've been speaking of. So,
thank you so much. I could go on forever about this topic, obviously. So,
and I think you're amazing. So, Dawn, if people want to get in touch with you, or they want to be able to, bring you into their schools and, do whatever you do best, how do they do that?
Yes, it's very easy. They can visit shineassemblies.com. That's my website, and it's free. I don't charge. I go to all types of groups, not just schools. I go to men's and women's groups. And I also have a Facebook group called Human Trafficking Heroes of Palm Beach County, and we share information about reports of human trafficking. We talk about prevention. We organize events, awareness events in the community. So that's another way to connect and actually get involved and make a change.
I'm absolutely delighted that you've been on this. I'm sorry?
Oh, I just encourage people to join the group, get involved. So, yes.
That's definitely important. So my guest today, again, has been Dawn Marie Basham, and I think she's an amazing guest who has really offered a lot of information and education about these topics of human trafficking and cyberbullying. And if you have an opportunity to really, really bring somebody into your schools or to have talks in your libraries and other places, do get in touch with Dawn. So thank you, Dawn, for being on the Susan Brender Show.
And thank you so much for having me and for devoting your time to this subject. So I appreciate that. You're doing a world of good for people as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it as well.